Hi, welcome to ACS Composite. My name is Joseph, and today we're going to be looking at rockers for a C7 Stingray. I have right here our 07 side rockers that we'll be installing on this 2014 Stingray behind me. We manufacture these right here in our facility, and they are injection molding plastic. So I'm going to go through a couple of details showing you a little bit what the parts are about, and of course how we install them on the car. These are made out of an ABS PC plastic, PC being polycarbonate. It's a very rigid material, and most importantly, it's made in a very large press. So these are injection molded in metal dies. We'll notice the part also has a full extension under the car, and what this is done for is to protect. So if we take a look at the car on the undercarriage, you have a body panel that rolls right under it, and that encapsulates the hydroform chassis of the car. And that's really where most of the chipping happens. Our side rockers will extend all the way through. So we do fasten this using aluminum split rivets, which I have right here. These are black anodized, and it's actually the same part that you find on a Z06. So we've been using these since about 2008. The good advantage, or the great advantage of these, is that they're split. That means they'll create a mushroom. So as we drill a 3/16 hole into the SMC rocker panel of the C7, these will slide through the rocker panel and finally create a mushroom effect of about 1/2 inch diameter on the inside. This is done to spread the load. So we see in the aftermarket, a lot of guys love using two-way tape. I call that the Band-Aid of the industry. We don't recommend that. We know it may work, but there's so many variables on durability that we really recommend the fastener. We've seen guys use self-tapping screws. Again, a big no-no. I mean, self-tapping screws are designed for metal, not fiberglass. So under cyclical durability or even vibrations, that is, they'll tend to loosen up and let go. So the biggest fear people have is the serviceability of a rocker. The probability of changing a rocker is pretty low, but if it does happen, all you have to do is basically use a 3/16 drill bit, center it on the rivet, and just disintegrate it. They're out of aluminum, very easy to do, one firm press. We actually have a video showing you how to do that and how to service or remove stock rivets. So it's really not an issue. So again, shy away from the two-way tape, shy away from the self-tapping screws. So what we have here is the ACS component and 3 of our competitors' panels that we've removed from cars over the last few weeks. And I thought it'd be interesting to showcase a little bit the difference between the pieces. One of the common calls we get all the time is really, what's the difference between yours and the other ones? So I'll admit, as a consumer, when you're online and you're looking at images, everything looks the same. I think most people use stock images of side rockers. So it's a little hard for you guys to see the difference between an actual part that they're selling you and what you're going to get at your door once you ordered it. So we're going to look at the features, and I'll talk a little bit about the process and why things are the way they are, and ultimately this is proportional to the price. So our pieces, basically, which we just talked about, is an injected molded ABS PC part. It's got a high concentration of PC, which is polycarbonate, a very stable plastic. Basically the same material you'll find on like headlights, and a lot of the components on the Corvette are ABS PC, so it's not fluke. This was designed for this application, so we basically formulate the plastic with our resin suppliers, which is local, and we manufacture everything literally 30 feet from where I'm standing today. So we have control. The next one is quality standards or build tolerances. This is probably the most important thing, and we could say that we're using all the OEM specs, and the reason we say that is because we are an OEM supplier, so we don't just write it. We've actually built several 100,000 pieces for both GM and Ford. We've done stuff for the marine, transportation, bus industry. So all this knowledge, we package it into this. And at the end, we get a part that we know will sell to you, and you'll be happy, and you'll be back for more parts because it'll be a quality part. So our goal is not to sell you a piece once, but get you as a returning customer and appreciate what we do and our love for the trade, really. So I have here the first piece, which is part from overseas. It's a thermoform piece. It's made out of ABS, so we have some common terms. And most importantly, it's thermoform. So thermoforming is basically a process you'll find a lot in packaging. So although the bubble wrap, when you buy a pen, it'll be in this thermoform piece. And I notice it or spot it, about 10, 15 feet away. They always look mellowed out. So that's the first thing I notice, especially here in the back. You'll notice how it's rounded. And basically their limitation is part thickness radii. So that's the sharpest feature they could get. While in metal dies, we're able to get a sharp little gap on it or a sharp edge. So this is the most visual thing that you could spot. And there's a couple of things about that. I mean, yes, it does look better. It will fit better, but it'll also last a lot longer. So when it comes to aero components, you really want to get a tight fit between the car and the aero. If you leave a gap, you're inviting air to go in, eventually vibrate, and potentially fly off, which is the worst case scenario. Next, we have the whole process itself has a limitation, and it's thermally made. So they take a sheet of plastic, ABS in this case, they'll heat it up in an oven. Surprisingly not, it's not high temps. Once it's reached its melting point, they'll slide it over to a mold and just let it melt over to the shape, and there you have it. They'll then take a router or a knife and cut the edges. So we have another variation of our piece, and you can notice how the edges are rounded the wrong way. You have no holes that are drilled, which is not a biggie, I guess, but still another headache to deal with. Ours are molded in the tool so that they're always at the same spot, parts born with it. And finally is the thermal stability. So if we're going back to the process itself, they heated it up to put it on the car. So in ambient temperature, this is dimensionally pretty close to ours. But if I just go outside and sit this one outside on asphalt, which is, I guess, 150 to 160, it will grow. So it will expand with heat and shrink in the cold weather. So as you drive your car through the seasons, even day to night, this thing's actually moving. Now we put some fasteners on it, and now you locked it. So over time, after a year or two, you'll start noticing little waves on it. So that's thermal stability. It doesn't have it. So that's a big flaw. And fortunately for this vendor, when you buy it, you're happy, you got a great deal. I think it's about half the price of ours. The pictures look the same. The paint's actually pretty, I'll just use the word shiny. Not perfect, but hey, for half the price, I don't think it's a bad part. But would I put this on my Corvette? Never. And then we have strength. I mean, mechanically speaking, our piece is twice stronger than what I'm holding here. So when you're driving your car at, say, 70 to 120 miles an hour, in that range, you've got quite a bit of force that's happening on these, and eventually this will crack. Usually it'll happen on a colder night because it's more brittle, so the mechanicals change again. And if we're taking this piece on a splitter, guaranteed it'll be a torn piece, and you'll think you probably hit something or misinstallation, but it's a property in it, so that's the biggest flaw. Then we have our family of carbon parts, and carbon fiber is a great material if it's made right. This here is carbon fiber, very lightweight and very, very brittle. Let's just say it's a poor quality carbon. They are using carbon, and that's a whole different discussion that we'll probably do in another video, but carbon should be made in an autoclave and it should be properly cured. In this case, they're just laying up carbon in an open tool. Again, we're back to an FRP mold. It's got a little bit of better features, but still that mellowed look. This one had holes, or it did when I took it off anyway. But it's very thin. I can actually see right through it, the light. So they really try to make it as lightweight or as cost effective as possible. But this will basically bend under any force. I mean, I shouldn't be doing this with just my finger. So you can imagine what this is doing when it's rolling down the highway. Then we just have the whole installation. These guys will basically tell you to go buy yourself two-way tape or self-tapping screws. So we covered that. Aluminum split rivets, which you could always get if you go down this route, but then you're dealing with the thermal stability when you put a hard fastener. So they will warp. It's a sure thing. Just give it a year or two and cycle that heat, you know, garage and car shows and track events. The parts need to be thermally stable. So if GM never used any one of these processes, there's a smart reason behind it. And basically it's something that you need to consider when you're shopping for parts, so you know what you're getting and at which price point and why things cost the way they do. So now we're going to tackle, we'll get the car back on the ramps. I'll go through the installation, I'll try to share some tips. Pretty straightforward install. So we're getting ready to do the installation of our 07 rockers on the Stingray. And I have the part here. I'm going to walk you through the steps, give you a little bit of my tips and different adjustments that are available. First step obviously will be to clean the surface. There's a series of 7mm screws that are located here and in the back, so that's pretty straightforward. With a driver, you'll remove that. The next and most important step is to dry fit the part. So there's a few things to know. This shape here is a nominal shape, meaning it's a zero spec surface. And now we're relying on the tangency of these two surfaces here. We have the fender, we have the rocker. This is glued to the chassis of the car. This cannot move. But the fender, on the other hand, we notice a lot of inconsistencies from car to car. Not that it's bad, it's just GM's build tolerance. And they have a pretty big tolerance when it comes to this gap. So sometimes you'll notice these are 1/8, sometimes they're as big as 1/4, sometimes we'll see a difference left to right. The good news, the fender's very adjustable. So I'd say 90% of the time we don't make any adjustments, but as we dry fit the part, I like to use A-clamps on the back side. I'm able to put it on, and it gives me a chance to see if I'm gonna have a gap or not here. So this is usually the difference between a professional install and a DIY installer, or somebody that just doesn't have the experience. So we're pretty fortunate. We've seen thousands of cars over the years, and we know that this is a pretty important detail. So right here, there's a 10mm screw, it's silver. This is the bolt you would use to adjust that. So obviously if the 7s are gone, you could use this 10, and basically match the rocker, the fender, and the 07 rocker, so you get a 0 gap. So sometimes this has to come out, go in. Obviously you're also considering the fender gap to the door, but you're able to find a balance where everything works out. So we're gonna get to it. I'm gonna get under there, do some installs. If there's anything particular, I'll highlight them. We will be drilling some holes. So we're using a 3/16 drill bit, a rivet gun. I use a battery one, simply because my hand just can't keep up. But a manual one will do the job if you're just doing a one-time install. So that's also available through our store or any hardware store. It's just a standard 3/16 rivet. Speaking of rivets, we're using again the famous split rivets, anodized black. So these will never discolor or change. The car will look clean forever, really. And the way these work is they go in your rivet gun, and this is what happens on the back side. It basically collapses it. When it collapses, it's actually wider than the head itself, spreading the load. There's about, I think, 14 of them per side, basically every 6 to 8 inches. Consistent load throughout ensures that the part is rigid at high speed, or if somebody were to apply pressure to it. So this is really an important element of the installation. Let's get to it. Well, first step is to clean. This is a 2014 with about 10,000 miles on it. It's actually in pretty good shape. We're starting to see some wear on this edge here. I see some white. So that is the exposed substrate, which is SMC or fiberglass. So these are actually fiber strands, and I don't really like that because fiber strands do absorb water. So over time it could rot. It doesn't rust, it's obviously it's not metal, but you do want to protect the surface, and that's a big advantage of our rockers that go all the way to the end. The screws we're referring to are these 7s, here, here, here. So the adjustment screw is usually right here. It's usually a 10mm screw. This one they've replaced with a 7. We'll take a look. Maybe they had to do some adjustments at some point on it. So the first step is to clean off the surface. Like I was saying, it's not a bad beaten up car for the miles it has. So we use any auto detailer or wash spray and basically scrub away. This one has some grime on it, so I might use some gunk just to remove the tar and get a clean surface. Since we'll never see the surface again, it's nice to get it as clean as new. And that's another reason why we usually like to install these on brand new cars right at the dealership. That would preserve the paint and make sure that you don't get any chips. But like I said, this one's not that bad. He's had some mud flaps, so another thing we'll be doing is adding our enhanced mud flaps, which work with our side rockers, and then you get the ultimate protection for the whole side carriage of the car. So using a 7. Next up is to dry fit the part. So I haven't put any fasteners, all the screws are off. I have 2 A-clamps. So I'm gonna use these just to hold in position. If you don't have these, you could check it and then reuse the screws. But I like to use these since I could get up and take a look. Always easiest to get some help. So Jonathan's gonna give me a hand. So I'm gonna set it to the car. And I'm using A-clamps. I'm gonna be putting these right where the jacking pucks or the jack points of the car are. And one of the first things I look at is basically here, I apply pressure. I've located the fender, so I make sure that the fender cavity is falling into my rocker. I'm looking for a 0 gap in this area. This car's perfect, so I don't need to make any adjustments. I walk my way to the back, and basically I reposition it, and this is looking great. We now see my little detail I was talking about at the beginning. This is closing up that gap. And that's really the big difference between the two processes. We're able to go pick up details like that. So now I'm going to put some of the screws back. Our instructions usually say to go straight to the rivet. We do that so that we ensure that you get the part sitting at the right part. In this case, because I was able to verify everything, most people go with the screws. We're going to do it this way for this video and just fasten it and get a double check. I'm going to put all the screws and I won't tighten them. One of the reasons we don't technically write this step in the instructions in this sequence is because if we tell you this, you're going to tighten them and then randomly sit the rocker at the wrong spot. And that's not really what we want. We want to get the rocker in the perfect spot, even if the hole is a little off, there's a little variance in it. So we want to be able to use that. And I've seen it in some cases where this gap is really big, the holes have to be routed. We also put an extra set of holes right next to it, so depending on the trim level, Grand Sport Z06 and all that, there's things you could do to make them fit right. So it doesn't mean you take the part and close your eyes. We still want to keep our eyes open and try to get the maximum of all the adjustments available to us. So now for the front. So if you have somebody to help you install them, it'd be great to basically hold this exactly where you want it and now tighten those screws. I'm ready to tighten my screws because I'm very confident. I'm happy with the fit. So many times we'll get calls asking customers why the part doesn't fit right. They've already installed it, they riveted it, and it's completely fastened to the car. And unfortunately the answer to that is remove all the rivets, clean the surface, and start all over again. So that's why this method, I'm able to come back, I'm happy with the gap, and I'm going to continue on to the rear, and then finally jump onto the rivets. So I'm ready to start drilling. I'm using a 3/16 drill bit. One thing to consider, I'm drilling a panel, or the SMC panel, which is only 1/8 of an inch thick. So as I drill, I don't need to go through with this whole drill bit, which is 3 inches. Basically only going to do this. So I could have put a stopper on it, which is what we tell you to do. I don't have one handy today, so I won't, but basically I'm conscious of that. I do watch out for the rear. There's some cooling lines in this area for Z51s and other trim levels. Again, it's a 1/8 panel. I just poke and I move on. I don't need to venture off. I've yet to hear anybody hit those lines, so pretty safe, I think, but we always try to take every precaution we can when drilling your Corvette. I like to drill and rivet, so I don't get carried away drilling all the way through. I put pressure and collapsed. Still happy with the fit, so I'm confident to carry on and keep hard fastening. I'm not going to move on to the most center mounting holes. So here I'm using a shorter rivet. So we have a long rivet for the outer edge, a short rivet for the inner edge. You could also use the long one. You just have to pry the surface to put clearance, but you will get these in the package and they're intended for that area. What I do is, again, drill. I just hit the aluminum frame, so I stop. I'm going to use a screwdriver or a pry tool just to get enough clearance, and also I'm ensuring that the car body panel is pressed onto my rocker. So many times I see customers come in with self-installs and their rivets are not properly crimped on. So I just went through the surfaces, I'm prying. So basically I'm pushing the red surface towards the black. That ensures everything is properly encapsulated. And complete. Pressure. I'm going to use a long rivet, so if ever you're servicing these and you only have the long ones, you could perfectly use these. What we've noticed car to car is the gap between the red panel and the frame varies a lot. So early production cars was very tight, hence we started doing this. Out of consistency, we've kept on doing it. This car is actually pretty forgiving, so just for discussion's sake, I'll pull a long rivet on this hole, drill the hole, long rivet into my gun. So you notice I got some room, but I could pry and basically still get the long rivet on the inside edge. So that could be an option when you're servicing or you're short on rivets, or you just can. So obviously the long rivet gets more grip, but there's nothing wrong with the short one. That's what the design intent was. Double checking I got all my holes covered. Double checking my fit. And all that's left is a little detailing shot and she's good to go. So the big question that we always get, again, is the fit. So once and for all, we'll answer it. I have here the other part. So this is the one where basically I was saying the features are mellowed out. I'm just gonna try to clamp it so you notice there's no mounting surface on it, so it's a little harder. But because the geometric features are not there, there's a little bit of guesswork when it comes to fitting. So even here, I'm noticing the angle is not the same. So I could see it's off by a couple of degrees. And then most importantly, as I move on to the back, well, now I have a rounded edge and I'm sort of guessing. I mean, this is where I think I would put it, but it's not quite right. I mean, I could see there's still a gap in it and the radii are so mellowed out that I could basically decide where I could do it. The part is very flimsy, which in a way is helping me because now I could actually shape it to the car. But plastic parts don't like to be under tension. I mean, every part should sit in its natural position. This one's gonna basically distort and match the car. So I guess that's helping, but under tension, meaning when it does warm up, this will move and distort. And a quick and fun way to do it when you get these parts, if you do, put it outside, mark on the ground the length, wait for a hot summer day on an asphalt, and you'll see this grow by 1/4 inch. So basically that's the proof or the scientific side of the expansion of this thermal instability of it. So that's a little bit the difference. I'm now gonna go back to the ACS part and complete the install of this side. Installation's complete for the side rockers. This was actually a very nice fitting car. We'll notice a nice gap here, right all along. You notice a beautiful fender to rocker seam. So we'll notice with a full undercarriage underneath, we're able to cover the painted portion of the lower OEM rocker. And right here, we're able to cover up the exposed strand. So we have a little bit more protection, and most importantly, a lot more chip resistant. So because the material is very hard, the PC helps us for that part of it. It's much more resistant to chipping. So even if it does chip, it's black throughout. And most importantly, we're protecting the painted part of the car, which is really not serviceable. Again, this is glued to the chassis, so if you do have to service or paint that, the car would have to go on a rotisserie or at least work upside down. So that completes our install. If you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to us on our website, Facebook, or even on our live chat.